Good evening, everyone. Guys, am I audible? Yeah, thank you. So, the last session we were discussing with different firewall technologies. So, we have discussed what is a packet filtering firewall. We have seen what is a application gateway and also stateful inspection firewall. Then we have seen if you have to place a firewall into the network, where exactly you're going to place it, right? And when we are discussing regarding this firewall, I said you can deploy a firewall into either routed mode or transparent or the bridge mode, right? And it is always routed mode that we prefer, right? So whatever firewalls that we will be discussing in this course now, right? We'll be deploying them in the routed mode, right? So you can take down this topology. So this is a topology that we will be using for our network. So we'll be working with two different devices, Cisco ASA and Storm Shield UTM. Right? So in both, we'll be using the same topology. Right? So what you see here, the firewall. So this will either be Cisco ASA or Storm Shield. Right? So make a note of this topology. So once you've take down this topology, let me know. We'll see what is Cisco ASA. So here, as you see on the right hand side, we have our LAN network. So LAN network I have taken as 192.168.10.0 network. And for all these LAN computers, your firewall will be the gateway. So the firewall's LAN interface, it has IP 192.168.10.1. And the WAN port, the WAN interface of the firewall is connecting to the router's inside interface. The WAN interface of the firewall is connecting to your router's inside interface. And these two interfaces, the WAN of the firewall and the router's inside interface, should have IP addresses in the same subnet. So here if you see the firewall WAN interface, I have taken as 206.182.201.122/29, and the router's inside interface is 206.182.201.121. So they both belong to the same subnet, right? And this particular part from your router's outside interface to the ISP, as we have already discussed in the last session yesterday, this is not in our control, right? So ISP will be taking care of it. So we don't have to worry about this. Right? So please make a note of this topology. Is the topology taken? Guys, is the topology taken? Okay, so now let us continue our discussion regarding the Cisco ASA firewall. So as I said, Cisco, the same brand who makes your routers and switches, they also have security devices. So under the brand Cisco ASA. Now this Cisco ASA, this particular firewall, you have both the hardware versions and the software version. Right. So the Cisco ASA firewall is available both as a hardware and also as a software. So initially it was only a hardware device, but later on Cisco has also released the software version. Now when you go with the hardware version or the software versions, what sort of features you get and all will be the same. So features wise, whether it is a hardware or the software implementation, you get the same kind of features, right? So the difference is whether is it a hardware device that you have to place it in your network, or whether it is going to be software that you are going to deploy it on your virtual machine, right? Like your VMware or your ESX or maybe your AWS or Azure and all. So there's a main difference. And this Cisco ASA is a stateful inspection firewall. So as we are discussing with different kind of firewall technologies, right? So this Cisco ASA is a stateful inspection firewall. And Cisco has made some small changes to its stateful inspection technology. So it is stateful inspection firewall, but Cisco made some minor changes to the stateful inspection technology. So here what Cisco says, generally according to your stateful inspection, right, outgoing traffic is always permitted, right? So when you speak about stateful inspection, the outgoing traffic is permitted by writing a ACL. Incoming traffic is denied by default. It can be accepted if the incoming traffic is matching with your existing state table, or you have written a dedicated ACL. So this is what we were discussing in the last session, right? Now what Cisco says, on your LAN and WAN interfaces, right? Cisco says on the LAN and WAN interfaces, you have to define something called a security level, right? So on the Cisco ASA device, you have to define something called security level, right? And Cisco's recommendation is security level 100 on the LAN interface, security level 0 on the WAN interface. Cisco's recommendation is security level on the LAN interface as 100, security level on the WAN interface as 0. And Cisco says you don't need a ACL You don't have to write a ACL to permit outgoing traffic. It says from higher security level to lower security level, traffic is automatically permitted. So Cisco Cisco's version of stateful inspection technology says traffic initiated by any source connected to an interface with higher security level trying to reach some resource on a network connected to the lower security level is automatically permitted. So traffic coming from higher security level to lower security level is automatically permitted. You don't need to write a ACL. And traffic coming from lower security level to higher security level is by default blocked. Traffic from lower security level to higher security level is by default blocked. Traffic from higher security level to lower security level is permitted by default. Right? So this is what Cisco has made some changes to the stateful inspection technology. So is it clear, everyone? What are the changes that Cisco has done to stateful inspection technology? So the behavior is same, right? So behavior of other stateful inspection firewall and the Cisco ASA will be the same. The only difference is how exactly this stateful inspection is being implemented. So in case of Cisco, you have to configure security levels. You don't need to do it on the other devices. Right? So here when you speak about the Cisco ASA firewall, for you to configure this ASA, right, along with the LAN and WAN interfaces, along with the LAN and WAN interfaces, you will have a management interface also. Right. Along with the LAN and WAN interfaces, you will also have a management interface. So for you to start with the firewall configuration, you have to connect your system. You have to connect your system to the management interface and access firewall through HTTPS connection. Right. You'll have to access the firewall through HTTPS connection. Right. The default IP address for the management interface is 192.168.1.1. The default IP for the management interface is 192.168.1.1. So when you are trying to configure the ASA firewall for the first time, you have to connect your PC directly to the management interface. Start accessing the firewall through HTTPS 192.168.1.1 and then download a software called ASDM. So ASDM is the software using which you are going to do all the firewall configurations. So ASDM is the software using which you are going to do the Cisco ASA configurations. Right. Now ASDM needs Java to be installed on your computer. To be very specific, Java 7 update 45. Java 7 update 45 is required on your computer for this ASDM software to work. Right. So you are going to do all the configurations using the ASDM software. Right. So is it clear how you can start the configurations of ASA firewall? Okay. Vijay, when you say AHDM is a software using which you are going to do the configuration for your ASA firewall. It's a Java application which is present in the firewall. So you have to download it to your system and use it. Right? So this is a Windows application what you get, right? But it needs Java 7 update 45 on the computer, right? And ASDM stands for Adaptive Security Device Manager. Adaptive Security Device Manager. And this is a Windows application. ASDM is a Windows application. You can't use it on Linux or Mac. So not only ASDM, you take up any other firewall, right? The firewall management software will only be available for Windows. No Linux, no Mac. So you have to do the firewall configuration using the software. It is always through Windows only. Is it clear, everyone? Uh, Guys, is the audio clear? Uh, okay, thank you. Mr. Bright, so there seems to be some issue on your end. You can once please check with the connection. Okay, so let us see how do we connect to the firewall, how do we download this HDM application, and how we can start the configuration of ASA firewall. So no commands, commands, we don't have to learn the uh, commands and all. Cisco says you do all the configuration using AHDM. Okay, so here this is my client computer, right? My LAN computer, the client. Now on this, let me check what's the IP address. So here, as you see, I have some IP address 192.168.10.10, right? So this IP address belongs to my local network, my LAN network, but with this IP address, I will not be able to connect to the firewall and start doing the configurations. Right? So what I do is I'll try to change the IP address. So let me say Optan IP automatically. Now on the ASA firewall on your management interface, you have a DHCP server running, right? So this DHCP server will assign a IP address to your computer automatically, right? So you can directly take the IP address from the management interface, right? So you'll get an IP in the same subnet as the management interface, and you can start getting connected to the firewall, right? So let us do that. So now if I check what's the IP address, I should have 192.168.1.2. So I have IP address in the same network as the management interface IP, right? So I got the IP address in the same network as management interface. So now let me access the firewall through a web browser. HTTPS 192.168.1.1. So 192.168.1.1 is the firewall management interface IP. So get connected to the management interface, and then so here you have this button, install ASDM launcher. Install ASDM launcher. So click on it. It will ask you for a user ID and password, right? So here by default, you will not have any username or password on the firewall, right? So by default, there is no user ID and password. You can just say OK. You will be able to download the ASDM application. Okay, so you are downloading this ASDM application directly from the firewall itself. So once your download is complete, you will be able to install it and continue with the configurations. So here, as you see on my downloads, I have the ASDM application. So install the software. So once the software is installed, ASDM will automatically run. So here it will ask you to give the IP address of the firewall, right? So it is asking you to which IP address do you want to connect. So here IP address will be 192.168.1.1. So that's the management interface IP address. So we say I want to connect with 192.168.1.1. So give the IP address, and there is no user ID or password, right? So by default, there is no username or password on the firewall. So no need to mention anything here. So you can leave it as a blank, say OK. So it would ask you like, okay, do you want to continue connecting to the firewall? Say yes. So if it is asking you like, okay, do you want to upgrade ASDM? You can say no, no need to upgrade ASDM. Okay, so it is asking you like, do you want to enable the feature smart call home? So this particular feature will keep sharing the firewall usage statistics and all to Cisco. So if you are willing to share the details, you can say yes. But if you do not want to share the details, you can say do not enable the feature. Say OK. So this is how you are going to get the ASDM application, right? So here you can see what is a firewall interface, what is a firewall name, right? So by default, you'll be able to view the interface, the firewall name and all on the dashboard. So it tells you what is a firewall host name. Then it shows you what is a firewall software version. So the firewall software version is 9.4 update 1, and then the ASDM version is 7.3 update 1, right? So it is telling you what is the firewall and the ASDM versions, and then whether the firewall is in routed mode or the bridge mode. And as I said, by default it will be in the routed mode, right? So we don't use bridge mode on the firewall, so it is in the routed mode. Then it is also telling you what is the total flash memory or what is the total amount of storage that you have. So it is 8 GB on this ASA firewall. That's the total amount of storage, and the total memory is 2 GB, right? So that's the amount of RAM that you have on the firewall, right? So this is what information you'll be able to see on the uh, dashboard, right? And here on the right hand side to it, if you see the interfaces, so as of now it says there's only one interface, your management interface, right? So all the other interfaces, even though they are available, as of now they are not configured. Okay, so is it clear, like what actually we see here? Yeah. So now if you have to start the firewall configurations, so by default, on a new firewall, you don't have any configurations except your management interface IP address, which is 192.168.1.1. So to start the configurations, here on the AHDM application, you have to click on the configuration button. So click on the configuration button. So once you click on configuration button, it will show you that there are multiple tabs. So on the right hand side, you see device setup, firewall, remote access VPN, cybersecurity VPN, and device management. Multiple tabs on the left hand side. So what we do is on the left hand side, by default we'll have to select um, the device setup option. So in device setup, the first option you see is something called startup configuration wizard, right? Startup configuration wizard. So click on this button, launch startup configuration wizard. So it will automatically start with the configuration wizard here. So no need to reset it to factory defaults, right? You don't have to reset it to the factory default. So you can directly continue using the modify existing configuration. That's because as of now, this is a new firewall, so there is no other configuration on it, right? So you can say next. So it will ask you what should be the host name, right? What should be the host name of your firewall, right? So if you want to change the name of your system, you can change it, right? So let me say I'll keep it as ASA. So I'll give the name as ASA. You can also assign a enable password. So by default, there is no enable password. So we can configure enable password on the device. So there is no old password, right? So you can leave this field empty, right? No need to give any old password. There is no old password on the ASA firewall. So we'll directly say what is the new password that we want, right? So let me say I give the new password as Cisco. So select the tab and type the password. So give the password and also confirm the password. Say next. So once you say next, it will ask you to choose the interface that will be connecting to internet. So which interface will be connecting to the internet? So you have to define the WAN interface configuration, right? So you have to define the WAN interface configuration. So here on your ASA firewall, you have two interfaces, right? Gigabit 0 and gigabit 1, right? So we say gigabit 0 by 0 should be your WAN interface. So generally it is the first interface which is always connecting to internet. The second interface is connecting to the local network. So gigabit 0 by 0, I say, will be connecting to the internet. That's a WAN interface. Gigabit 01 will be our LAN interface. And according to this topology, we also have to assign the IP address for the interfaces. So let us do that. So I say the outside interface is gigabit 00. So once it is done, enable the interface. I'm giving the security level as 0. So there's a default security level that you get, right? Keep it as 0. No need to change the default security level on WAN interface. It should be 0. Give a name for the interface. Now, if you recollect the router configuration, so when you are configuring routers, have you given any name for the interface? So guys, did you give any name for the interface? So on the router's configuration, we were not giving any kind of configuration, any kind of names and all for the interface, right? So here, when it comes to your firewall, right? In the firewall, you have to give the interface name for each interface. So if you have two interfaces and you want to use both the interfaces, right? So you'll have to give the name for each interface, and in your configuration you'll be using this particular name of the interface. So you say apply the configuration on LAN interface, apply the configuration on the WAN interface, right? So you don't say apply this configuration on gigabit 00 or gigabit 01, right? So you'll always say apply this on the LAN interface or on the WAN interface. So I'm giving the name of the interface as WAN interface, right? And then give the IP address. So according to our topology, it is 206.182.201.122, right? 206.182.201.122 is the IP. Subnet mask 255, 255, 255, 248. So that's a IP address and the subnet mask for our WAN interface. So once the IP address and subnet mask is given, say next. Now it gives you with a summary of our available interfaces. So as of now, only the WAN interface has been configured. We have not yet configured the LAN interface. So select gigabit 01. Gigabit 01 is our LAN interface. Click on edit, enable the interface, right? Enable the interface. Give an interface name. So I give the name as LAN interface. And for the LAN interface, security level should be 100, right? Security level should be 100 for the LAN interface. So once the security level is given, next, give the IP address for the interface. So in our topology, LAN interface should have 192.168.10.1. So give the IP address, choose the uh, subnet mask 255, 255, 255, 0. Say okay. So now in the summary here, you can see you have the LAN and WAN interface IP addresses configured, and management interface it's already there, right? From the beginning, so no need to make any changes. Say next. So in the next step, it is asking you what will be the default gateway, what will be your router. Now here, according to our topology, do you see, is this firewall directly connected to internet? So the firewall is not directly connected to internet. So if firewall has to connect with internet, or firewall has to forward our request to internet, it has to pass through the router, right? So can I say this router is a default gateway for my firewall? So this router will be the default gateway for my firewall. Just similar to how firewall is the default gateway for all our LAN computers, router is a default gateway for our firewall. So in our routing configuration, this is what we have to define. We have to say this router's IP address is the default gateway. So we say to reach internet, you have to forward the request via WAN interface. To reach internet, you have to forward the request via WAN interface. Now, how do we define internet? When you are writing ACL on a router, how did you define internet? Did you give some IP address? So to define internet, right, we were saying 0.0.0.0. So here you don't have to do that. So click on network. So just click on browse. And here there is an object called any. Right? So there is an object called any. Any means 0.0.0.0. So you don't have to manually give the IP address as 0000. So now we are saying to reach anything on internet, request has to be forwarded via WAN interface. To which IP address? 206.182.201.121. So we are saying to reach anything on internet, we have to forward the request via WAN interface to 206.182.201.121 IP address. Say okay. And next, now it is asking you like, do you want DHCP to be enabled on the LAN interface? If required, you can say yes, give the starting and ending the IP address of your DHCP. But if DHCP is not required, you can skip this. It's not mandatory. And then it is also asking you like, do you want to go with address translation? So as of now, let us skip this address translation. We will discuss about address translations and all, right? And then we will see how do we configure this. So as of now, I say I do not want any address translation. Say next. And then it is asking us, uh, as of now, AHDM access is only permitted via management interface. So do you want to permit AHDM access from any other interface? So when you speak about the firewall configuration, for the initial configuration, I said administrator will connect via the management interface and do the configuration. But this is for the initial configuration. But on your day-to-day basis, will you take your PC connected to the firewall management interface for your day-to-day activities? We will not be connecting our system to the management interface, right? We want all the configurations to be done from our local network. What do you say? So we don't want to go with firewall configuration from the management interface column. So we want to do it from the LAN. So that's what we will be defining here. So I say I want ASDM access or HTTPS access, right, from the LAN interface. But from which IP address? From 192.168.10.0 network computers. I'm saying any computer which belongs to 192.168.10.0 network from the LAN interface should be able to connect via ASDM. So define that, say next and finish. So once you say next and finish, it gives you a error message. Don't worry, right? It's not something wrong with the configurations. It's because in the initial connectivity, when we are using HDM for the initial connection, we did not authenticate. Right? We said like there is no default password on the firewall, we are directly logging it. But later on, once you start doing the configuration, you are also defining this enable password and all. So what we do is say close. Now it will ask you for authentication. So give the enable password here. There is no need to give the username, right? In the password part, here you will have to define your enable password. So enable password I have configured as Cisco. So I'll give the enable password and say login. Now once this login is successful, you can click on refresh and then say finish. So now your configurations are sent from AHDM to the firewall. So is it clear? How do we perform the initial configuration using the initial configuration wizard? So guys, are you clear? How did we perform the initial configuration using this configuration wizard? So when you do the configuration from AHDM and you say OK, right? Configurations will be sent from AHDM to your running configuration. So similar to your router, when you do the configurations on AHDM, right, and you are sending it to your firewall, this configuration will be sent to your running configuration. So same as in your router, you have two type of configurations. You have running configuration and startup configuration, right? So when you are doing it from AHDM and you say uh, apply, that will be sent to the running configuration. So when you apply the configuration, it's going to be sent to running configuration. Then after you do the configuration, if you say save, so I'll show you, you will have a save button. So when you say save, that will be saved into startup configuration. Right. When you say save, that will be sent into the startup configuration. If you don't save it, you just say apply, that will be sent to running configuration. Now, what's the difference between this running and startup configurations? So guys, what's the difference between this running and startup configuration? So running configuration is available like as long as your device is up and running. Startup configuration is the one which will be used when your firewall boots up, right? So when you try to shut down the firewall or when you try to reboot the firewall, whatever is available on the whatever is available on the startup configuration, that will be considered, right? But when you speak about running configuration, all the configurations that you do now, right, that will be saved into the running configuration. But if you do not save the running configuration and you reboot your device, all the configuration changes that you have done will be lost. Okay, so on the ASDM, once you complete your initial configuration wizard, right? This configuration changes like what all you have done, assigning the IP addresses, assigning the default gateway and all these things have been sent to the running configuration, not to the startup configuration. So to save it into the startup configuration, you click on this save button. So it means your configuration has been sent to the startup configuration. So it is saved into your startup configuration now. Okay. So once you go with this initial configuration wizard, you have assigned the interface IP address. What is a LAN interface? What is a WAN interface IP? What is the default gateway for your firewall? You have defined that. Right. Along with this, you also need to define few more settings, few more configurations. So you'll have to define the firewall date and time, right? So to do that, same under device setup, you have system time. So here you can see it gives you the option to set your date and time. The clock option is available. So it says the date is 8th of December 2022 and the time is 15 hour 18 minutes. So is the time correct? 15 hour 18 minutes? So this time 15 hour 18 minutes is not correct, right? At least as per our time zone, this timing is not correct, right? So what we do is we have to change this time. We'll have to set it to the correct time. To do that, you see that your time zone, right? So the time zone is GMT plus 0, but in India it is GMT plus 5 or 30 minutes. So the time zone is not correct. So that's the reason your firewall is not showing you the proper time. So what we will do is change the time zone. Okay, so change the time zone and apply. So once you change the time zone, now your firewall is showing you the correct date and time information. Right? Firewall is showing you proper date and time information. So once the date and time information is proper, then you can say save so that this configuration will be saved onto your startup configuration. Right? So this will be saved into your startup configuration. Okay, is it clear how we have to set the proper date and time on the firewall? Yeah. So once you have set up the proper date and time, right? Then let us go to the firewall settings. So when I click on the firewall tab here on the left hand side, so there are multiple options like access rules, NAT rules, and all this. So under access rule, you can see that there is a default policy which says source can be anyone trying to reach a destination which is connected to a lower security level. So destination which is a lower security network. For all IP traffic, the action to be taken is port. So it says any source, if it is trying to connect with a less security destination or a destination which is on a lower security zone, should be permitted for all IP traffic. So with this security policy, will I be able to access internet from my LAN computer? So the security policy says source anyone trying to reach something on a less secure network should be permitted, means the request should be permitted. So can I try to access internet from my LAN computer now? So higher security level to lower security level is by default permitted. We don't need to write a security policy. So here, if I say uh, I wanted to access maybe say Microsoft, as you see, I am unable to access that particular web page, right? So I'm not able to access this Microsoft.com website. Now, one reason why I'm unable to access it is because if I look into the IP address on my computer, what was the IP address? My IP is 192.168.1.2. Does this IP address belong to the LAN or the management interface network? So this particular IP address belongs to the management interface IP, right? So this does not belong to our LAN network, right? So the first thing that I have to do is change the IP address on my computer to the LAN network. But before I do that, let me disconnect from AHDM because initially I have connected to the firewall using 192.168.1.1 as IP. So I'll disconnect from AHDM, change the IP address on my system. I'm changing it to 192.168.10.10 with the default gateway as 192.168.10.1. Say OK. So now I have changed the IP address on my LAN computer. Okay, so as you see, 192.168.10.10 is my IP address. So now can I retry this web page? So let us just try it again. Okay, so as you see, we are not able to access this particular web page, right? So even though we have a security policy which says higher security level to lower security level, traffic has to be permitted, we are unable to access this page. So what could be the reason? And I'm connecting to the firewall now on the LAN interface IP, which is 192.168.10.1, and I have to give the password as our firewall's management interface. Sorry, not the management. The password as your enable password. Right. Say okay. So I'm reconnecting. And what could be the reason? Why are we unable to access internet from our LAN computer? No, there's nothing on the router. So router is just forwarding our traffic to internet. So there's nothing on the router. So guys, what about others? What's your opinion? Why we are unable to access internet from the LAN computer? Okay, so the reason why we are unable to access internet from our LAN computer is, see the uh, LAN IP addresses. So if you see this LAN IP, they are something like 192.168.10 dot something, right? No, Mr. Bright, when you say LAN, right? LAN is connected to this interface with security level 100. WAN or internet is connected to the interface with security level 0. So according to Cisco's stateful inspection technology, LAN should be able to access internet without any issues, higher security to lower security. But here the reason why we are unable to access is, if you look into the LAN computer IP address, it is 192.168.10.10, 10.20, 10.30, something like this, some 10.0 network. Now, when you look into this 192.168.10 dot network IP addresses, are these public IP addresses or private IP addresses? So this 192.168.10.0 IP addresses, they are all private IPs, right? Now, can we reach internet with source as a private IP address? So we will not be able to reach internet with source as a private IP, right? So source should always be a public IP address if you have to communicate with some resource on internet, right? So what we have to do is convert this private IP addresses convert our source private IP address to a public IP. So we'll have to convert this source private IP address into a public IP address. So this particular process, converting the private IP address to a public IP, we call it as NAT, Network Address Translation. Have you guys come across NAT somewhere else? So where did you use NAT earlier? So guys, where did you use NAT? So you are doing NAT on the router for forwarding the traffic towards internet, right? So can you help me with how many type of NAT configurations do we have? So guys, how many type of NAT configurations do we have? So three types. What are those? So we have three different type of NAT configurations. We have dynamic NAT, PAT, and static NAT. So do you all recollect this? Three type of NAT configurations. Guys, what about others? Only Harish is responding. Forgot NAT. Okay. So here on a router, you are doing three different type of NAT configurations: dynamic NAT, PAT, and static NAT. So when it is on a firewall in your ASA, in addition to this three type of NAT configurations, you will also see something called port redirection NAT. You'll also see something called port redirection NAT. Right. So four different type of NAT configurations are available on your ASA firewall. Right. Four type of NAT configurations are there on the ASA. So we'll first start with the dynamic NAT. So this dynamic NAT can be defined as a many-to-many NAT translation. Dynamic NAT can be defined as many to many translation, many private IP addresses to many public IPs. Many private IP addresses translated to many public IP addresses. Right. So when you say many private IP addresses, these are nothing but your LAN IPs or all your LAN computer IP addresses. Right. Many private IPs are nothing but your LAN computer IP addresses. And when it is many public IPs, here you have to define a pool of public IP address. So for many public IP addresses, you'll have to define a pool of public IP addresses, right? So whenever there is a request coming from some of your LAN computers, firewall can use IP address from this public IP pool and do the translation, right? So here what happens? Let's say for all the requests coming from my LAN network, which is 192.168.10.0/24, I'll take up a pool of IPs, let's say 206.182.201.123. 122 is already used on the firewall WAN interface, so I cannot use 122 again, right, into NAT translation. So I'm taking 201.123, 201.124, and 201.125. So I'll take up these three IP addresses into the pool of public IPs. So now what happens? Whenever there is a request coming from one of our LAN computer, firewall will take a public IP address from this pool, do the translation and forward the request to internet. So whenever there is a request coming from one of our LAN computer, firewall will take a IP address from this pool, do the NAT translation and send it to internet. Right? So that request initiated from LAN computer will reach internet. Right? So in this way, if I use dynamic NAT, how many LAN computers can access internet at any given point of time? So with this dynamic NAT, right, I'm taking up three IP addresses, right? So I'm taking three IP addresses here in the public IP pool, right? So three computers from our LAN network will be able to reach internet at any given point of time, right? So if you take a public IP pool with say five IP addresses, you will be able to permit five computers from LAN to reach internet at a time. If you have a public IP pool of say 100 IP addresses, you can permit 100 computers to reach internet at a time. Right? So it all depends on how many IP addresses we are able to define in this public IP pool. Right? So if you are only able to give say two IP addresses, only two systems from LAN will be able to reach internet. If you are able to give 10 IPs, 10 systems will be able to reach internet. Okay, so we'll do the configuration for dynamic NAT. We'll see how exactly this will work. And Vijay, as you're asking, like, where do we get this public IP address? So when you are taking this internet connection from your service provider, right? So you'll have to request your internet service provider, and they'll be giving you with the pool of IP addresses. Okay, is that clear? You'll be getting these public IP addresses from your ISP. Yes, you'll have to pay per IP address. Okay. So now on the firewall on your ASDM, go to configuration, firewall settings. So in the firewall settings, we go to NAT rules. So once we go to NAT rules, here we will add a new NAT policy. We will add a NAT policy. So it will ask you what is the source interface and what is the destination interface. So give the source interface as LAN interface, destination as the WAN interface, right? So source as a LAN interface, destination as a WAN interface. Source address. So what will be the source address for our NAT? So source address should be something that belongs to our LAN network 192.168.10.0, right? So that is what we will be defining here, source address. So click on browse. You will not see any object for the LAN network. So you'll have to create a object for the LAN network. So add a new network object. So in the new network object, you can give a name. So let us say this is LAN network. And I say that this is a network object. So in the network object, you can define whether it is a host or a range of IP addresses or a network. I'm saying that this is a network. IP address, that is your network address 192.168.10.0. Subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Right. So I'm giving the network address and the subnet mask. Right. Say OK. Select this network address as your source. So we are saying if requests are coming from 192.168.10.0 network and they are trying to reach any destination on internet via the WAN interface, then apply dynamic NAT. Then apply dynamic NAT. So when you go with dynamic NAT, you'll have to again define the pool of IP addresses. So again, click on browse. So you'll not have this pool of IPs predefined. So you'll have to define them manually. So add a new network object. So let us call it as a dynamic NAT pool. And I say this is a range of IP address. So this is range of IP addresses starting with 206.182.201.123 and ending with 206.182.201.125. So starting with 206.182.201.123, ending with 125. Say OK and select that as a translated source address. Say OK. So now you say the original source is any of your LAN network computer. And if it is trying to reach internet through the WAN interface, those requests have to be translated using this pool of IP addresses. Say OK and apply so that the configuration changes that we did are now pushed from the ASDM to your running configuration. So now if I go back to my web browser and uh, retry accessing the web page, so this time I should be successful. So it will take some time to load the web page and its contents, right? So that is because when you go with this ASA firewall, Cisco says you also have to purchase a license. Right? If you do not purchase a license, you will still be able to use the ASA virtual machine, but there is a limitation on how many number of connections can be permitted. Right. There is a limitation on how many number of connections are permitted. So it will only permit 10 connections. So that's a limitation. Okay, so is this one clear? How we are defining dynamic NAT? So can we use this dynamic NAT on a live environment? Okay, so when it comes to the dynamic NAT, we will not be able to use dynamic NAT on a live environment. So what would be the reason why we will not be able to use it in a live environment? So the simple reason why we cannot use it on a live environment is because when you look into your LAN network, you'll have hundreds of computers, right? Hundreds of systems. And unless you have hundreds of public IP addresses, you will not be able to permit all those LAN systems to reach internet, right? So that's the major drawback with dynamic NAT, right? So if you want 100 computers from your LAN to reach internet, you will need 100 public IP addresses. But the problem here is organizations will not have hundreds of public IPs, right? So even if your organization is willing to pay for public IPs, ISPs themselves are not ready to give hundreds of IP addresses to one organization, right? Because as of now, you don't have many IPv4 addresses available, right? So all the IPv4 addresses, the entire pool of IPv4 is already exhausted, right? So ISPs are not ready to give more IP addresses to any organization or any customer, right? So dynamic NAT is only a concept, but you will not be able to use it on a live environment. So then what do we use on a live environment? So if I want all my LAN computers to reach internet, what should I use? So here, if we want all our LAN computers to reach internet, right? Instead of dynamic NAT, we are going to use PAT or port address translation. Now, in case of PAT, it is a many to one map or a many to one translation. Many private IPs translated to one public IP. Right. So all your LAN computer IP addresses, many private IP addresses, will be translated to only one public IP. So will that be much easy if it is only one public IP that we need for the translation? So instead of requesting your ISP and using multiple public IP addresses, If it is only one public IP that is needed, right, it will be much simple for us. Right? And if at all, say your organization has registered for say 8 IPs or 10 IPs or 12 IPs, something like this, those additional IP addresses can be used for hosting your servers. You don't have to waste them only to permit LAN computers to reach internet. Right? And here generally when we say all your private IPs will be translated with only one IP, this IP is generally going to be your firewall's WAN interface IP address. Right? So generally you will be using the firewall WAN interface IP address itself for the translation. Right? So you will not be using a separate IP. Whatever firewall WAN interface IP address is there, you are going to use the same for the NAT translation. So when you do the configuration, this is how it looks like. So let me delete this dynamic NAT policy. Click on add a NAT policy. Source interface, as I said, is your LAN interface. Destination is WAN interface. So no change in this. Whether you are configuring dynamic NAT or PAT, or you're going with a static NAT or port redirection, source and destination interface will be the same. So no change. Source address before translation should be our LAN network. So we say if requests are coming from 192.168.10.0 network, we have to do the translation. So source address will be our LAN network. Destination is anything. So no change in the destination. Right? So destination will be anything. So LAN computer trying to reach any address on internet, it should be translated using firewall IP. So the translation type, we select it as dynamic PAT. So the translation type is dynamic PAT, and the translation address or translated source address, that is what should be the IP address after translation. So that is going to be your firewall WAN interface address. That's going to be firewall WAN interface address. Say OK and apply. So now whenever you try to reach internet, firewall will translate all your requests using the firewall's WAN interface IP address and forward them to internet. So as I said earlier, without a full license, Cisco will only allow 10 connections, right? So it will be it will take some time. It will be a little bit slow for you to see the web pages and all. Okay, so as you see, we are able to access internet, right? Now, what would be the translated IP address for this request? So the translated IP for this particular request should be firewall's WAN interface address, right? So we can also verify this. So 206.182.200.123. So here on the MyWAN IP, you can see 206.182.201.122 is our translated IP address. So now not only one computer from the LAN, so even if all your LAN computers are trying to reach internet, all the requests coming from those LAN computers will be translated using 201.122 IP address. Is it clear? To permit all our LAN systems to reach internet, we don't use dynamic NAT, but instead of dynamic NAT, we use PAT or port address translation, right? And here, all the requests coming from our LAN computers will be translated only using the firewall's WAN IP address. Okay, so is this one clear? The difference between dynamic NAT and PAT? And if you have observed here, we have only done configuration for NAT. We did not write any security policies and all that, right? So even without writing a security policy, we are able to access internet from our LAN computer, right? So that is because as of now on the ASA firewall, there is a default security policy which says if traffic is initiated from a higher security zone trying to reach something on a lower security zone, it has to be automatically permitted. Right? So there's a default policy on the ASA firewall which says traffic coming from higher security zone trying to reach lower security zone should be automatically permitted. So because of that policy, as of now, even though we are not configuring any security policy, we are able to access internet. Right? But this is not how we are going to use our firewall in a live environment. So this is not the policy what we will be using. We'll have to configure some policies based on our requirements. Right? So what sort of policies we may need to configure? How do we configure them and all? So that we'll discuss in the next session tomorrow. Is it clear? Okay, so I'll also be sharing this firewall virtual machine. So also download those ASA firewall and the Storm Shield VMs, right? So tomorrow I'll also show you how you'll have to configure VMware for hosting this firewall VMs and all, right? So earlier we were using only one virtual machine, right? So that is directly connecting to internet. But now you will have to go with multiple VMs, right? So I'll show you how you can do the configurations for it. Okay, so with this, I'll end the session for today. So we'll join in the next session tomorrow and we'll discuss about how do we do the security policies. Okay, thank you all.